David Anthony Burke was born on March 28, 2005, in Queens, New York, though much of the narrative of his youth is overshadowed by the spectacular acceleration of his musical career. His family later relocated, or spent much of his upbringing, in Houston, Texas, where Burke would come to see music and digital media not just as hobbies, but as lifelines. In his early years he was homeschooled, an environment that contributed both to his sense of seclusion and to a tendency to develop internal worlds of imagination, fantasy, and creative expression. Before discovering what would become his signature musical voice, Burke was a gamer, a maker of Fortnite videos, and someone who sought connection through online spaces. It was partly necessity that pushed him toward music. He once said he began making musical tracks to avoid YouTube copyright strikes on his uploaded game montages. As he matured, he drew from a surprisingly wide palette of influences: anime, narrative mythologies, the emotional rawness of modern alt and indie music, and the digital-first, viral logic of a generation born into TikTok. The first significant breakthrough in Burke's music career came in 2022 with the release of Romantic Homicide and Here With Me, tracks that would find traction on TikTok and streaming platforms, positioning him as a singular voice in alt-pop and genre-fluid music. Those songs, with their haunting melodies, introspective lyrics, and willingness to veil emotion in shadows, resonated in a cultural moment where vulnerability and darkness intermingled in youth expression. Over 2023 and beyond, Burke expanded his discography through EPs Petals to Thorns and The Lost Petals, steadily building momentum and deepening the contrast between his musical persona and his private self. In 2024 he released singles such as Feel It, which charted on Billboard, Leave Her, and Where'd It Go Wrong, as public anticipation for a larger album project mounted. His debut full-length album, Withered, arrived in 2025, a work conceived in part as a culmination and a reset, as Burke himself described it, a closing of one chapter even as he embarked on what might become another. The album's themes lean into decay, loss, emotional desiccation, romantic failure, and the difficulty of reconciling inner darkness with visibility. He supported the release via the Withered World Tour, scheduling shows across the US, Europe, and Australia, riding the wave of social media, playlist culture, and a growing cult of youth fascination. Yet, as often happens in public life, the scaffolding that supports a rising star can also become the conduit for collapse, or at least crisis. In early September 2025, a grim discovery thrust Burke into the eye of a tragic and sprawling investigation. On September 8, police responded to reports of a foul odor emanating from a vehicle impounded in a Hollywood lot. Inside the front trunk, or frunk, of that Tesla, registered under his name, human remains in an advanced state of decomposition were found. A subsequent investigation confirmed that the remains were those of Celeste Rivas, a 15-year-old girl who had been reported missing in April 2024, when she would have been 13. The cause and time of death have not been conclusively determined. The medical examiner deferred judgment because of the body's decomposition and the uncertainty of how long it had been in the vehicle. The discovery sent shockwaves through his fan base, the music industry, and social media alike, raising urgent questions about how a public figure associated with themes of darkness, heartbreak, and mortality could be entangled in a case of a missing teenager whose remains were hidden in a car registered in his name. From the moment the news broke, responses came swiftly and chaotically. The Withered World Tour was immediately disrupted. US dates including shows in Seattle and Los Angeles were cancelled. The deluxe version of Withered, subtitled Massessence, was indefinitely shelved. Promotional activity by Interscope and collaborators paused. Brands that had recently attached their campaigns to him publicly distanced themselves. Crocs and Hollister removed visuals and announcements featuring him, citing the ongoing investigation. Artists he had collaborated with also responded. Kelly Uchis, for example, announced she would pull a joint track. The cancellation of further European and Australian tour dates followed in many cases, or remained uncertain as the crisis deepened. On social media, various threads unraveled, some defending him, others calling for accountability. Critiques of his lyrics and past remarks resurfaced, and rumor networks began threading connections between leaked or unreleased songs and a girl named Celeste. Some users highlighted matching tattoos, a shoe on the index finger, between David and the late girl, fueling speculation about their possible relationship. Online posts and fan forums claim to have seen old Discord messages and server logs suggesting a relationship or interest, though none of these digital clues have been confirmed by law enforcement. In the midst of this, his label and representatives released statements that he was fully cooperating with investigators. A search warrant was executed at the Hollywood Hills residence where Burke had stayed. Computers, electronic devices, and other items were seized for forensic analysis. If you are enjoying this video up to this point, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. That helps me a lot. Thank you. Authorities have repeatedly emphasized that, as of now, Burke has not been named a formal suspect or person of interest, though the investigation is being treated as a homicide case pending further evidence. The boundary between what the public wants to know and what law enforcement can reveal is being tested daily. Within this tumult, some additional developments have been reported that compound the gravity of the situation. Reports suggest that Burke transferred deeds for Texas properties to his mother shortly after the Tesla discovery, raising speculation about legal strategy or asset protection. There has been friction in his representational world, too. His manager publicly denied any complicity, stating he had no foreknowledge, did not own vehicles in California, and had little day-to-day interaction with Burke, seeking to distance himself from speculation. Meanwhile, media outlets continue to comb through archival footage, interviews, and social media posts looking for inconsistencies or hidden meanings, such as references to a Celeste in unreleased lyrics. The family of Celeste Rivas has made public pleas for answers, emphasizing that she was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend, and demanding transparency in how investigators proceed. The funeral for Celeste was held privately in early October, but public mourning and demands for justice continue to echo across social media, local news, and national outlets. What makes this case particularly combustible is the interplay between art, persona, and real life. Burke's musical identity has long flirted with darkness. Romantic homicide is not just a title but a refracted metaphor in his discursive world. In interviews, he has described weaving alter egos and detective narratives into his music. Some critics now argue that the very mythology he cultivated is being weaponized in public discourse. Others caution against jumping from metaphor to material guilt. The tension lies in how much an artist's internal preoccupations can or should be conflated with criminal investigation. As he once said in discussing Withered, fame had reset his brain, and the boundary between creator and subject had become blurry. For many fans, his persona was part of the allure, someone speaking the language of heartbreak, decayed beauty, emotional disintegration, and encoded internal myth. Now, those encoded symbols are being read by thousands in real time, with forensic, social, legal, and moral frames competing. Because this is an ongoing criminal investigation, many crucial threads remain unresolved. The forensic timeline, how long the body was in the vehicle, how decomposition advanced, what clues internal to the car, DNA, fingerprints, phone logs, forensic trace evidence might exist, will likely determine whether charges are filed. Investigators must decide whether Burke had involvement in the death, or only in the concealment, if evidence supports that path. Whether there is proof of intent, presence, or conspiracy is unknown. The public narrative, however, has already made its verdicts in fragments. Some have assumed guilt by association, others await due process. And in the court of cultural memory, this may be Burke's defining moment, not the music, but the mystery. For David Anthony Burke, the story now is about fragility, accountability, and the limits of public myth. An artist who once occupied a mesmerizing space between vulnerability and darkness now faces questions that cannot be answered through metaphor alone. Regardless of how the legal case resolves, the consequences are already cascading: cancelled shows, paused promotion, lost endorsements, severed trust, reputational ruin, or redemption waiting in balance. His songs, once listened to as emotional catharsis, will now be reinterpreted under a lens of suspicion. The unanswered question remains: how did a teenager's remains come to rest in a car bearing his name? And whether he will walk out of this as an accused, as a suspect, or without criminal charges will depend on evidence, procedure, and the patience of justice. In decades past, the rise and fall of artists have always captured public imagination. Here, the stakes are higher because the intersection is not only fame but life, death, and unanswered sorrow. David's biography, once promising in its digital-born brilliance, is now forever marked by the gravitational pull of this tragedy. The coming months will reveal which of his chapters close, which reopen, and whether the voice that once spoke to millions will have the space to speak again, or will be silenced not by art, but by accusation.